Hi guys, and welcome back to another video and a third installment in our high mileage E92 M3 project. Now the rod bearings have been done, I'm finally happy to drive this car. I haven't driven it yet and I'm really curious to see what it feels like with 151,000 miles on the clock. Or is it 152? I don't know, it's getting there anyway. Really curious to see how it drives, and then we can actually go through the car and see what we can improve on. So I have been out driving our Japan Red E92 earlier today, so I've got a good reference point of what a good one drives like, and I want to see how close or far away this is before we start working on it. So let's jump in the car and see what we can do. As with any of our cars I jump into and I need to drive them, it has no fuel, so first port of call is to actually get some petrol in this car. So this is the first time I'm driving the car, so you're joining me live and direct, getting my first impressions of it. And I have to say, just looking around the interior, it is actually very, very clean. I was not expecting to pick up a car with 151,700 miles that was actually this clean. It doesn't look that far away from our Japan Red's car interior, to be fair. So obviously this car has been sitting on the motorway and done a lot of long journeys, and that is reflected in the condition of the rod bearings. I mean, initial impressions are it feels fairly tight. Obviously I'll know when I drive it a little bit harder. It doesn't ride too badly. The stock exhaust on this is very quiet, so we will fix that at some point, but let's see how it drives. Yeah, I mean, initial impressions are doesn't feel like the steering is that disconnected. It's actually going where I want it to go, which is quite fun. There, see, just around that little roundabout I could feel the back end being a little bit sloppy, so I'm sure the bushes are going to be well past their best. But let me get some fuel and then I'll take it out on the open road. Join me back in the car on a dual carriageway, and I have to say I'm actually really surprised at the condition of the interior. Everything kind of works in here. The AC works, the DCT gearbox is going through the gears as I would expect. Even the cup holders all work. It's just generally a very clean car, so whoever had this car did actually look after it despite the mega miles on it. I can just detect a little bit of shake at around 70 miles an hour on the steering wheel, so we'll have to check out and see if that's some wheel balancing or some of the front suspension components. The other thing I've noticed is on the sort of slight undulations on the road, it doesn't feel like the dampers are working that well, because the car is not quite settling. So when it goes over a bump, instead of going over the bump and just settling in one position, which would normally happen, the car kind of keeps bouncing. But if these are on the original dampers, which I think they are because there's no record of them being changed, the car has not done too badly at all. I'm going to just head over to some country lanes now, the ones we normally drive on, just to see what it's like. Initial impressions of the steering are that it's slightly heavier than what I'm used to, so I'm not sure what's causing that. Just when I turn in, it just feels like it's not as precise, which again I would expect. There's probably a lot of things in that region that we need to swap over to make it drive newer. And just on that dual carriage, I've noticed some kind of wind noise coming from here, so we'll have to look at the trims. But initial impressions are overall it does not feel as bad as I was expecting it to. Let's see what it's like. Yeah, it does feel a little bit lethargic, so I wouldn't be surprised when we put it on the dyno that it's not quite making what we see from a stock car. Just round this roundabout I can feel now, yeah, it's just not, the back end feels actually quite loose, like it's not connected to the car as much as I'm used to. But let me go take it to some country lanes and I'll see what it's like. This is a very familiar road if you watch our channel. I was just actually out in the Japan Red E92 on the same road, so I've got a really good feel of what it's like. Yeah, it just feels really flat in the mid-range compared to what I'm used to. So once we get it on the dyno, I'll be interested to see how much power it's making and what the cause of that is. My hunch would be spark plugs, because we can't see the spark plugs have been changed for around 70,000 miles, and as this car has ionic knock, they're very important. But yeah, just in general, it rides pretty well apart from the dampers not settling, but the car just feels quite loose, especially around the back of it. So there's definitely some improvements to be made in the bushings and the suspension components. Yes, for a competition pack, it's got a lot of body roll and it's just not as precise as I'm used to. But do you know what? For the amount of mileage the car's got, I'll say it again, it's not horrendous. I've driven other cars with a lot less miles that are worse than this one. But gearbox seems to be functioning completely normally, which is good. Doesn't feel like it's got any kind of GTS update, which they all need, so it's a little bit slow. Just never get bored of the sound of that engine. I'm sure this will get an Venturi plenum intake and airbox lid at some point during its process. But yeah, just the turning and the steering just did not feel precise. Brakes, they're not bad. I would say they feel slightly spongy, so not the same kind of bite and feel you get. I mean, the brake discs and the pads themselves looked okay, but some of the lines probably need replacing. There's a lot of surface rust underneath there. But I have to say, in general, I'm actually pretty impressed with the car for the amount of usage it's had. We're back underneath our Monte Carlo Blue E92, and Aston has actually been out for a drive. So Aston, what were your thoughts on how the car drove?
First thing I noticed, which you probably noticed as well, as you're kind of powering out of a bend, traction like flinging up, and you kind of pulling the power a little bit. I mean, that's probably down to two different things, either these bushes and arms being worn, or maybe the shocks as well, because I did notice on like a straight line when you're really giving it, it's kind of a bit bouncy.
To me, it feels like there's no movement on the shocks. It feels like they're not doing anything.
There's like a lot of travel after when you like hit a bump.
Yeah, it just keeps going.
It kind of just keeps going. It doesn't really level out. So that could be causing it to kind of kick out on the bends as well.
Yeah, because it feels to me like you're losing the contact patch of the wheels on the road, and that's probably why it's
skipping out.
So we need to figure out what it is. But instead of like, I think under normal circumstances, if this was my car, I would literally change the whole back end. But we want to try and do it in stages and show what it actually is and what improvements single things make. So, I mean, in my opinion, I think we should be changing the dampers first.
Yeah, change the dampers first, because we know it's got that travel and it's skipping on the corners. So if we change those and it helps the bends, then we know that was our issue. If it doesn't, then we know we can start looking at these arms.
But definitely, I know the bushing and everything's going to make a big difference, because the whole back end just feels like it's wandering. Yeah.
I mean, we know the tyres are good, it's 4Ss, so we know the tyres are not an issue. I mean, if you look at the arms and stuff, you can see the bushing's quite old, obviously, and it's quite solid. There's not a lot of play in them. If I can get the lever bar in there, there's a bit of play. Yeah. But again, this arm stops it from moving too far, so you can't really get too much out of it. And then you've got like these rear toe arms, they've got quite a bit of flexibility in them. So stuff like that would stop the back end from being rigid, and then end up kind of losing that tail end that you were explaining when you're on the bends and when you're driving. I think it's pretty similar on the front as well, to be fair, when it comes to like the lower arms. Like these ones here, again, there's quite a bit of movement in them. And the ball joints on the drop links are quite loose as well. So that's kind of not really doing its job on the
I don't know, when you're steering it as well, it does feel like when you turn it first, it doesn't feel like it's doing a huge amount compared to like the red car.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel very connected, like all over. It's not like a boat, but it's just not massively connected to what we're used to.
Yeah, and I think that if somebody doesn't know what one of these is like and drives in it, they might think it's okay if they've come from another car. But for us, we know what a good one drives like, and this is not a good one.
Definitely not a good one. Yeah, we've been in and out of these cars so many times now. We just kind of, you know what doesn't feel right, what doesn't sound right. Again, like these front arms, there's a little bit of play, but I don't think that's excessive. But they're quite a solid arm anyway, so you're probably not much of an issue. It's mainly these ones and then the drop links. The tie rods may be a little bit loose as well, but the steering feels quite tight. The steering feels quite heavy, to be fair.
It feels a lot heavier than
the red one. So yeah, I guess it's just a case of changing the shocks, like we discussed, and then kind of going from there and see what improvement it makes. What are you thinking shock wise?
So shock wise, obviously, again, if it was my car, I would just literally put Bilstone B6 on it straight away. But as this is a car that someone's going to buy who's maybe on a little bit of a budget, we have just taken a perfectly good set of
off the red one.
The standard shocks, they've only got like 60,000 miles, so we're going to put those on here first, because you can probably get a set of used ones for between 200 and 300 pound. Maybe someone who's upgraded to some coilovers for track or whatever. So we'll start with those first, and eventually we will fit something else a bit more special on as the car gets upgraded. But it'd be interesting to see how much difference that makes, so people can understand how much difference, like when the shocks are completely gone, even going to used ones, how good is that? And then after that we'll start, we've ordered all the rear arms and everything, haven't we? So we'll do that, and then we'll address the subframe
itself. Yeah, I mean, like you say, we know that car drives fine. If our main comparison is this car to that car, because obviously more than or less than half the mileage, so we know that the shocks are good in that. So yeah,
well, they were perfect.
It makes sense. It makes sense to try them on here, because if that does cure it, then we know that that's made a huge difference, and then we can start looking at the rear arms and stuff anyway.
Okay, cool.
And then maybe the front ones.
So that's the next plan of action for this car. Next time you join us, we'll be putting the used dampers on this and then seeing what the difference is, and then the video after that will be changing the suspension arms.
Changing the rears. Drop the whole back end out.
Cool, so we see you next time. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, please remember to smash that like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. If you want to join the conversation, please drop a comment below and we'll try our best to respond to you. If you want to watch more of this project, you can do so over here. If you want to watch what YouTube thinks you might like from our other content, you can do so over here.